If you have ever felt like something was watching you through your own laptop camera, I need you to listen to these 3 stories before you go online again tonight. Each one starts small: a curious click, a random message, a bored scroll through a website you probably shouldn't have opened. And each one ends with someone realizing the internet had already found their real address, their real faith, their real bedroom window. These are 3 true accounts sent in by people who thought they understood how dangerous the internet could be. They were wrong. The first story comes from a man who was 17 when it happened. He said it started the way most bad decisions start, with a friend who knew a guy. His friend had a connection on a hidden marketplace, buried deep in the darker corners of the internet, a place where people bought drugs with the same casualness most of us use to order takeout. He wanted something to help him push through his senior year. So he made his first purchase, and told himself that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Once he had access to that marketplace, curiosity took over. He started scrolling through listings that had nothing to do with what he came for, stumbling across counterfeit currency, forged documents, and weapons listed as casually as used furniture. The deeper he scrolled, the more the marketplace felt less like a shady online store and more like a doorway into something much bigger and much darker than he expected. Eventually, he found his way into a chat room attached to the marketplace, filled with strangers advertising drugs, prices, and shipping methods like it was an ordinary business exchange. Buried in that chat was a link, just a string of random characters ending in .onion, dropped with no explanation. He clicked it out of pure curiosity. The page that loaded was almost aggressively plain, a black background with a single line of text at the top reading Home Base, and underneath it, a long list of unlabeled links, most of them leading nowhere. Dead ends, left over from some abandoned corner of the web. But a couple of them loaded. One dropped him into another chat room, this one with no name, no rules, and only a handful of usernames logged in, each one a meaningless jumble of letters, exactly like the one he'd typed for himself, because he genuinely did not care what he was called there. Scrolling up, he could see a fragment of an earlier conversation in a language he didn't recognize. Then one user switched to English, still active, still watching the room. Before he could type a single word, that user greeted him first, a short, casual yo, like they already expected someone new to wander in. He answered back, and the stranger asked what he was looking for. He typed that he didn't really know, that he was just exploring, and admitted this was his first time this deep in. The stranger asked how he'd found the room, and he mentioned the home base page. The reply came a few seconds later, just a short laugh, and then a link. No explanation, no warning. The page took an unusually long time to load. First the background rendered pure black, swallowing the corners of the screen. Then a small text box appeared near the bottom, empty, waiting. And last, after everything else had already loaded, a video window appeared. At first he assumed it was some kind of clip, something he could pause if it turned out to be nothing. But the feed had the unmistakable texture of something live, grainy, slightly delayed, the kind of quality that makes you second-guess whether you're watching a recording or watching someone else's real time. The room in the frame was dim and mostly empty except for a chair, and in that chair sat something that looked, at first glance, like a mannequin, still and slightly slumped, arms hanging at odd angles. He stared at it for a long moment, trying to convince himself it was nothing, some kind of prop meant to unsettle first-time visitors. Then, without warning, it moved. The figure surged upright and lunged directly at the camera, and the audio detonated into a wall of distorted, screaming static that filled the room around him. Whatever mask the figure wore filled the entire frame in that final instant, close enough that all he could make out was a wash of pale, featureless white. Before the image dissolved into black, he scrambled back to the chat room to demand an explanation, typing frantically, asking what the hell he had just watched. The reply came back almost immediately. Just 3 words, "Keep watching," followed by a laugh. Then the user left the chat entirely. When he switched back to the video tab, the stream was gone, replaced by an empty black screen and that same waiting text box. Except now, it wouldn't accept anything he typed. Before he could process what was happening, his entire browser window closed on its own, without any input from him. Then his speakers crackled to life. A voice came through, low and deliberately distorted, clearly disguised, and it said his first name. His actual first name. It told him it already had his files. A window popped open on his screen, his own webcam feed staring back at him, his own startled face lit up by the glow of his monitor. He didn't wait to see what came next. He slammed the laptop shut and physically drove it to the electronics store where he'd bought it, asking the technician there for help. The technician told him someone had clearly managed to pull basic identifying information off the machine, enough to know his account name, and strongly recommended a full factory reset. He agreed immediately. He said he didn't lose anything meaningful in the process, since the computer was still fairly new, but the experience left him with one piece of advice he still repeats to anyone who will listen. If you are ever curious enough to explore the hidden layers of the internet, never do it without a VPN, and never assume that even the sites people call safe actually are. The second story comes from a 24-year-old from a small town in Nova Scotia, Canada. He described himself as someone who deliberately keeps his circle small, just a handful of close friends and co-workers, which is exactly why what happened to him felt so senseless. He spends a lot of his free time on Reddit, posting regularly enough that unsolicited messages weren't unusual for him. So, when a message request came in from an account he didn't recognize, an account that would later be deleted entirely, he didn't think much of it at first. The message told him to check his email, specifically the spam folder. Confused, he typed back, asking who this even was, and at the same time, pulled up his inbox out of pure reflex. Sitting in his spam folder was a single email with a subject line in aggressive capital letters, reading simply, "I know who you are." He opened it, and his stomach dropped. The body of the email laid out an uncomfortably accurate paragraph of his own personal information, his full name, his Reddit password, his home address, all wrapped around a demand. Whoever sent it wanted a one-time payment of $5,000 in Bitcoin, sent to a wallet address included at the bottom. He described the feeling that followed as his heart climbing into his throat. A wave of helplessness so total it felt like the ground had opened underneath him. His first instinct was to grab a piece of tape and blindly cover his webcam. His second was to check whether the Reddit account that messaged him had responded, which it hadn't. He reported the account anyway, more out of desperation than any real belief it would help. Then he replied to the email itself, copying the exact message he'd sent on Reddit, demanding to know who they were, how they'd gotten his information, and whether this was some kind of prank. 5 minutes later, a response landed, still in all capitals, insisting this was very real, that they had everything they needed to find him, and that his best option was to comply quietly. He had no intention of paying. He didn't even have that kind of money sitting around. Instead, he messaged every friend he had, practically begging someone to admit it was a joke before he escalated things by involving the police. Nobody confessed, and the moment he threatened to call the authorities, he knew immediately none of his friends were behind it, because they would have folded instantly. He ran through everyone at work too, but came up empty. He convinced himself, without much conviction, that his password had simply been stolen through malware, and that the rest of his information had been scraped together from there. He forced himself to sleep that night, with the laptop powered completely off. The next day, he avoided it entirely, working off his desktop instead, changing every password he had across every account and app on his phone the moment he got home from work. It wasn't until late that night, worn down by boredom and a nagging need to know if anything had changed, that he finally opened the laptop again. Everything looked untouched. Reassured, he checked Reddit and confirmed the account that messaged him had been deleted. He wandered into a subreddit dedicated to hacking and online scams and posted his entire experience, hoping someone there could make sense of it. While he was typing, he noticed the taskbar at the bottom of his screen had shifted to a darker shade. Curious, he minimized every window open on his desktop and found his wallpaper had been replaced. He recognized it instantly because it was a photo of himself, taken through his own bedroom window. He could see the white frame of his windowsill in the shop, and the flash had caught him mid-sleep, lying in his bed with no idea he'd been photographed. Seconds later, a pop-up window opened, accompanied by the sharp chime of a Windows error sound containing a single word, "Bay," followed by a small winking emoji. He shut the laptop screen and forced the machine off by holding the power button down until it died. Then he pulled his blinds shut and called his parents. It was still early enough that they picked up right away. He told his father someone had hacked him and somehow had photos taken through his own window, and his father was at the apartment within the hour, helping him load anything valuable into the back of his truck so he could stay somewhere else for a while. Before they pulled away, his dad stood in the driveway and shouted furiously into the night, threatening whoever was behind this, daring them to show themselves. He admitted it was a strange scene to witness, but he was too shaken to feel embarrassed by it. He stayed with his parents for weeks, using his mother's computer whenever he needed to get online. He blocked the email address that had sent the original threat, and eventually worked up the nerve to return to his own apartment. Even now, he says he still tenses up at every unexpected sound outside his window, still braces himself every time a new email notification appears, quietly hoping the whole thing really was just an empty threat designed to scare him into paying, and that whoever was behind it has simply moved on. The third story comes from a 25-year-old woman named Miranda, who said she dealt with more than her share of online harassment over the years, mostly because social media makes stalking disturbingly easy for the wrong kind of person. This particular incident started with an email that, looking back, she said she should have recognized as suspicious immediately. It claimed she was being sued by some company she'd never heard of, and included a link to click for more details. She clicked it. Almost right away, her computer started behaving strangely, glitching, freezing, occasionally spitting out random sound effects for no reason. Even after multiple restarts, she assumed she'd picked up some kind of virus, though she had no idea Yet how far it had already spread. The next day, her phone filled with messages from friends asking about a strange Instagram post, wondering if she'd actually written it herself. Confused, she opened the app, only to find she'd been logged out entirely. Someone else had control of her account, and if they had access to that, she had no way of knowing what else they'd gotten into. The post itself turned out to be some ridiculous cartoon meme, embarrassing in the pettiest way possible, which somehow made the whole situation feel even more unsettling. While she was still trying to process that, her Snapchat exploded with notifications from a random account that had just added her, repeatedly demanding she call them. Eventually, she gave in and called. The video connected to show only a sliver of someone's face, a young man who looked to be in his 20s, clearly smiling, and something about the slow, drawn-out way he greeted her made her skin crawl instantly. Frantic, she asked what he wanted in exchange for giving her Instagram back. What followed was a stream of deeply unsettling comments, him explaining that he watched her constantly, that he found her beautiful, and that hijacking her account was simply the only way he could think of to finally get her attention. He told her he'd hand the account back if she agreed to be his, using the phrase, digital girlfriend, and in the moment, desperate to regain control of her own accounts, she agreed, without hesitation. He gave her the new password. The instant she was back in, she changed it again, locked her profile to private, and posted a story clarifying that the previous post hadn't been her, that she'd been hacked. She pushed him for more information, asking his real name and how much he actually knew about her. He told her to just call him John, said with the same unsettling smile she could still make out in that narrow sliver of his face, and made it clear he could dig up anything about her that he wanted, refusing to show the rest of his face, no matter how she asked. She played along, pretending everything was fine, all while fully aware she was talking to someone genuinely dangerous, eventually getting him off the call by promising to message him again the next day. She immediately told her friends everything, and they were unanimous that she needed to lock down her account properly, enabling two-factor authentication before deactivating it entirely and blocking him. He did not take that well. About an hour later, her Snapchat lit up again from him, and against her better judgment, she opened the messages anyway. It was another threat, telling her that he knew exactly where she lived, and that blocking him had been a mistake. Frightened, she finally brought her parents into it, and her father called the police immediately. She still hadn't blocked his Snapchat by the time the police arrived, and it turned out to be the right call, because while they were sitting together in the kitchen waiting, a new snap came through. A video, this time. Him, sitting in his car, parked directly in front of her house, captioned with a warning not to block him again. She hesitated before opening it, and by the time her father sprinted outside in a rage to confront him, the car was already gone, presumably driven off the moment after he sent it. She said the police, to put it plainly, did almost nothing, seemingly out of their depth when it came to anything involving hackers or online stalking. Still, she sent him one final snap, a photo of the police car parked outside her house, with a caption warning him that contacting her again would get him arrested. He opened it and blocked her instantly. She admits her story ended better than most people's do, but she still can't shake how much a single stranger managed to learn about her, how quickly an ordinary evening turned into someone parked outside her window, and how little anyone could actually do about it once it started.